We are here with another episode of Live with Greg, and I'm here with Katherine Revoir, who is an artist, a counselor, and a minister, correct?
Mm-hmm. And a mom and a grandma.
And a mom and a grandma. And a yogi.
Yogi, landlady.
Landlady. Wow.
Good friend.
All right.
Things like that.
Throws parties.
Yes.
And you have a Thursday night gathering.
Yes.
What is the gathering?
Well, it's called Sacred Conversation, and it began about 5.5 years ago with a friend of mine who's a colleague who is a nonviolent communication facilitator, and he wanted to have a group, and I wanted to learn more nonviolent communication skills, and I'd done lots of groups and he hadn't, so we combined his resources and my mailing list and my home, and we started was called like an empathy group, where you practice the principles of nonviolent communication, which is basically about compassionate communication. And now it's evolved into all the things that I like to do now. So I've added to the nonviolent communication skills by also offering information about interpersonal neurobiology, which is something that I'm passionate about, social neuroscience, and also I've become a facilitator of family constellations, and so I do that.
Family constellations?
Yes.
Being like a family tree?
Well, yes and no.
Like, is it truly planetary?
Yes and no. all of the above. Epigeneticists have found that we don't just inherit our parents' eye color and all of those things. We also inherit their trauma and their love and their stress. And so things that happened to our parents and our grandparents that we don't even know about, we may not even know them, they show up in our neurology. And from a neurobiological standpoint, when we're born into a family system that goes back hundreds of generations. And you know, when your parents got together and had you, he had his family system, she had her family system, if that's who they were, and they each brought their own rule book for belonging in this family system that they learned from theirs. And so by the time you or I are 2 years old, we're very clear about what it will take in order to belong in our family system emotionally. So because we are born so helpless, you know, of every species on the planet, we're the most helpless when we're born and take the longest to grow up. Survival for an infant is the same as belonging and acceptance and being loved and cared for. So an infant will do anything to belong. And attachment theorists have found that at 4 months of age, a baby is looking at the primary caregiver's face, usually the mom, not always, and can tell what emotions are not being reflected back. So if a baby has an angry face and the mom can't tolerate anger, then the baby will basically cut that out of their emotional lexicon and then grow up and wonder why they have such a hard time feeling angry. So the baby might say, oh, you know, in their little 4-month-old non-cognitive way, they might say, well, it's not okay to get angry, I'll cry instead. So they learn to cry instead of get angry. And then, that combined with all of the things that we do as infants and really young children in order to survive the family rule book cause us to basically cut ourselves off from ourselves, which causes a poisoning in our relationships as we get older. So we take on the attachment style or brain use pattern of our parents because that's all we have, right? So then we take that, however they are, we are. And then we turn around at age 4 and we go to kindergarten, and then we interact with our teacher in the same way, and we interact with friends, and then we grow up and we get into intimate relationships, and then, oh my gosh, there are the same issues that show up in an intimate relationship that have to do with what happened or didn't happen in our family of origin. That's probably more information than you wanted to know.
No, not at all. It's so much information.
Yeah.
Like, my brain explodes with questions that are just like a shotgun.
Yes.
Because there's elements of, like, looking at the race situation in our country, which is so prevalent.
Yes.
I mean, obviously it's been prevalent forever, but it sure is now very on everyone's consciousness.
Yes.
And from what you're saying, there's a historical healing that's a necessity because there are painful programs that have been handed down through generations.
Yes. Yes. And there have been a lot of studies that have done with survivors of the Holocaust and their children, and the grandchildren are definitely taking on the trauma of their grandparents, often without knowing anything about it.
Right. All right. Yes. Okay. I follow all that. Now that's a very scientific,
Yes.
biological, neurological.
Yes.
Okay. You have this other aspect of you, which is a very ethereal, spiritual part of you.
Mm-hmm.
With the biological, scientific aspect
Yeah.
of itself, do you think healing and peace and love and this is maybe a silly way to ask this, but can nirvana be experienced and lived purely scientifically?
Give me a sentence definition of how you see nirvana.
Complete peace and love in all action and thoughts all the time.
Yeah. I don't think it's one or the other. It's kind of like, the nature versus nurture, thing that's been going on. Are we spiritual? Are we physical? I think that because of my spirituality, which honors the wisdom principles that are common among all the major wisdom traditions. And the first wisdom principle that is common among all wisdom traditions is that there's only one of us here. Oneness. Everything is connected to everything else. Nothing is not connected to anything. The butterfly in the Amazon and the polar bear and we all hear those. It's true.
Now, do you say that even scientifically?
I think that it's scientifically true. I can't tell you exactly the resources for that, but the way I hold everything, including, how you're talking about nirvana as being, can you just have that from a biological, physical thing? I think everything is integrated. That what I call spiritual includes the physical. Because, people say, well, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, right? I feel like I'm a spiritual being having a spiritual experience. And everything is spiritual. And, you know, once I was in between doing things that I love to be doing, and I wasn't sure what to be doing. And so I was working at a ministry down in Santa Cruz, and I came back and I didn't know what to do with myself as a minister, as a new minister. And so I went to the farmer's market and I set up a card table and I put up a sign that said free advice. And
it sounds like you had some experiences.
Well, no, I just thought, yeah, I had some great experiences, but I talked to a seasoned minister who was a friend of mine, and I said, you know, should I call it spiritual advice? And he said, well, isn't all advice spiritual? And, you know, that was really profound for me. What isn't spiritual?
I agree 120%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think science and spirituality or religion, it's all the same seeking truth.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just talking about CCC earlier. Mm-hmm. My best experience.
A church in Tiburon.
Right,
yes.
Right. For the there's the academia coming out. Was a day they had of spiritual, like reverends, etc., and scientists, and it was a panel. And I'll never forget this one woman who was a mathematician, a doctorate many times over, deeply in math, and she said she entered math because she wanted something very solid. Mm-hmm. 1 + 1 =
yes.
2.
Yes.
And the further she got into it, she realized at some point it was falling apart because of the theories and things that she was getting into, which I think currently we would say is quantum physics in many ways. So it does seem like all things kind of keep, if you follow it deep enough, we all arrive at this place of now what?
Yes. Yeah, as the Sufis say, there are many fingers pointing at the moon.
Yeah.
You know, if there's one moon, and a lot of people have a lot of different things to say about it, but it's still one moon. You know, we're still all connected with ourselves, each other, and everything else, including the butterflies in the Amazon and the polar bears, and, you know, our government and everything.
Okay, so the three things that I think of that you, like professions of yours, minister, artist, counselor. Sounds like the artist was the first profession you took up?
Yes, yes, I did. I studied photography. I studied psychology in college, but I dropped out because it was boring. And my boyfriend was sleeping with somebody else, and so that was a really good reason to leave college. Wow, show him. Yeah, show him.
Darn it, why do we make these silly choices?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I wish I had a mentor back then.
Oh, yes.
It's really my only regret in my entire life is not having a mentor to, you know, shake me by the shoulders and go, wait a minute. You want to think about that again, you know? Even though every single decision I've made, which is I think part of the whole oneness conversation, has led me to exactly what I need for the next expression of myself. So because I dropped out of college, then I got really passionate about photography. And so I moved from Los Angeles up to San Francisco to go to the Art Institute, San Francisco Art Institute in 1969, which was like a wild and fabulous time to be in San Francisco. And that was really cool. And then that led to 1,000 other things. And then, yeah.
Did you ever meet Jim Marshall?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
He's one of my favorite photographers.
Oh. No, I don't know him. Yeah.
All right, so...
Annie Leibovitz.
You met her?
Oh yeah, we were in school together.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I heard I just yesterday, I think, heard a story of her and a relationship she had with, I forget the guy and his wife. Like and and a lot of drugs. Anyway, a lot of stuff about her I didn't know was real with her.
Yeah, we think sometimes that because people are tremendously talented artists, that means that, you know, they haven't had trauma.
Right.
Or, you know, that they haven't had really hard lives emotionally. And, yeah, so.
All right, so then you're on this path of a photographer.
Yes. And then I got pregnant. And then before I got pregnant, I dropped out of art school to help my brother start a natural food store down by the airport in San Francisco, because in 1971 there were already 3 natural food stores in San Francisco, and that was way too many. And there was one in Palo Alto, and that was too many. So we did it in Burlingame, of all places.
And did it work?
It worked for him, for my brother. 47 years later, he just closed it.
Wow.
Just closed it, yeah. Probably the only mom and pop natural food store left in the Bay Area. Yeah. So I got pregnant and had a wonderful child, the one in that painting over there. And it didn't work for us to be in the same town as her dad. So we moved up to Katati and lived in a chicken coop. And then I knew a guy from the Art Institute who was a painter, and I showed him some stuff that I had been just drawing for fun, and he said, "Oh, I'll teach you how to paint if you want." So I would come down to his house in Woodacre. I moved to Marin so that I could paint with him. I could learn how to paint with him, and I studied painting with him. That's where I learned how to paint. Yeah, and I did that for a long time, and then I got interested in the ministry when my life fell apart after starting a business in the gift industry, putting my artwork on T-shirts and no cubes and hats and bags, and that became very popular because I happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right images, right at the time when people started putting images on T-shirts, which was 1988, I think. Yeah. And then
when you say, you mean like art, like fine art images?
Yes. Okay. It really wasn't until then, other than the psychedelic stuff,
right,
that people put images on T-shirts. They would just wear, you know, plain T-shirts. But I was into cows, and so I did some cows, and I actually made some cows out of wood, and I screen printed them to look three-dimensional. And that's how I started in that business. Because well, that was another story. I moved to the East Bay and got married and had another child, and we split up, and then I came back here to this house and didn't know how to support my 2 kids, so I started making these cows out of wood, cutting them out with my little jigsaw, and then screen printing them to look three-dimensional. All of a sudden people were selling them, and they were in Orvis Catalog and Spiegel and Z Gallery and all these places, and so then I was in business and didn't even know what an invoice was. Yeah. So
that's wonderful.
There I was doing my art, but putting it on T-shirts and stuff. Yeah.
It's a very blessed life.
It was a blessed life.
It still is.
It was so blessed, and I was really successful, and then everything fell apart in my life at the same time. Every corner of my life collapsed at once.
The business,
the industry changed. People stopped wanting to buy T-shirts, and they wanted to buy picture frames and candles and home things. And my mother was dying of cancer in Los Angeles, and my son was 11, and he was troubled and in trouble. And the relationship of my life, which I thought we were going to be together forever, you know, he just left. And I just, you know, but that was like the darkest night, and yet because of that, I said, oh, time to get around to that relationship with God that I've been avoiding since, I was 16. I'll do that later. I don't need that now. I'm okay. Really. I'm okay, God, really. No. I was like on my knees. And it was like, okay, what I learned was, you get on your knees and you stay there. and so that's how I found a church that I never thought I would find, a church that was progressive and inclusive and diverse. And I found one. Yeah.
And you say since you were 16.
Yeah.
So up till 16, do you think you had a relationship with God?
Only because my mom, took us to church, and it was a beautiful church, and they had wonderful stained glass windows. Oh God, they were beautiful. Those old ones, they made in like the 40s and the 50s, rich colors. That's what I remember about it. But, I thought that it just didn't make sense to me. I couldn't kind of with my left brain figure out about how Jesus could do all those things. It was an Episcopal church. And so I just, I didn't have much use for it. My dad was probably an atheist. He would stay in bed on Sundays, and my mother would take us to church. So I just walked away from it, And then later thought, maybe I'll do something about that. But not until I was on my knees did that happen. And then it happened, and I became, just kept going to classes to learn more about this philosophy that was about how our consciousness is creative, which is basically quantum physics, but from a spiritual perspective. And so I did that for a long time, and then got the call to go to ministerial school without knowing what I was going to do with it. And so I did that. So I just kind of kept along, but I took my art skills and I brought them to the spiritual thing by drawing silly cartoons that help people understand spiritual principles. And that's what I do now, helping people understand neurobiology.
With your art and your cartoons.
Silly cartoons, yeah.
And you have a book right now that's published. What is it? It's
2 books. One is a children's book that's called Create, a journal and sketchbook. It's about creative drawing, writing, and thinking for like 7 to 14-year-olds. And it's very fun and interactive. And then after that was published in 2000, I think, by Chronicle Books here in San Francisco. And then I get information through my intuition, and I listen to it, and my inner guidance and resources usually, either drops feathers or throws bricks or whatever, whatever it takes to get my attention. And I was talking to the publisher of the children's book, and she was telling me, oh, we're so excited, we're going to publish a book, and we found a wonderful illustrator. And I went, no, I'm the illustrator. And I went, oh, that really sucks. And then I was talking to her again, and she said, well, you're going to have to take all the stuff about God out of this. Because I had things like questions like, if you could ask God a question, what would you ask? Those kind of questions, because it's all interactive and drawing.
In the book Creative.
In the children's book, Create,
Okay.
yeah. And so then she said, well, we're going to have to take all that out. And so then I just got this really clear message that said, well, if they're going to take the spiritual stuff, then you will write a book that is just about spiritual stuff. And so that's how I came to write Spiritual Doodles and Mental Leapfrogs, a playbook for unleashing spiritual expression. Yeah, which is another interactive book that I totally hand drew.
Did Chronicle publish that?
No. A house named Red Wheel Weiser, which used to be a Buddhist and a spiritual, and then they came together, Samuel Weiser and Red Wheel, and they published it. And it's still actually on the back list after, 2000, like 17 years ago.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
How did you keep the physical elements of life together, like paying bills and all that, when everything fell apart, and you had 2 children.
Yes, I had 2 children.
So how did you...
Well, I've always rented rooms in my home. When I bought this home in 1979, I couldn't afford a small house. I had to get a big house to have people help me pay the mortgage. When I was an artist, when I was painting portraits, I painted that. I did that. I painted portraits. I did illustration. I did whatever I could do, basically, and I didn't spend much money. And then as I became a practitioner and then a minister, I learned how to do to officiate wedding and memorial services. I started doing that, and then I was able to put myself through school.
As a minister?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the school?
I put myself through ministerial school.
Is that the school you're speaking of just now when you said you were doing weddings and able to put yourself through school?
Yeah, that school, yeah.
Okay.
It's a school, it's a master's degree in consciousness studies. Yeah, and I did that by doing weddings and memorial services. So, yeah.
When you had your table set up at the farmer's market?
Yeah.
How did that go?
Oh, it was, you know, sometimes I think about doing it again, but it's like, it was fun. It felt like very kind of exciting and adventurous because people didn't know what to think. And, you know, there'd be a lot of guys coming by asking me about the stock market and things like that. What should I invest in? But I had some really sweet interactions with people. I remember this 7-year-old girl came up once. I also did it downtown Mill Valley. The 7-year-old girl came up and she said, you know, I really want a dog. And my parents won't let me have a dog. And I'm just, you know, I don't know what to do. I've told them how much I want a dog. And it was like, she was so, you know, this was so important to her. And it was just such an honor to sit with her and to companion her where she was, you know, to really get what she felt about it and how important it was, you know. And then when I didn't like give her advice until she really asked me. She said, well, what should I do? And I said, well, maybe you could, you know, figure out a schedule of things that you could do around the house and, you know, do better at school. I think that was one of the things that she wasn't doing so well at, and I could certainly relate to that. I went, well, I was a terrible student myself. Yeah.
In the Thursday group,
Yeah.
have you had meetings where, I don't know if this is the right word, volatility came up, where like, you know, arguments came up, even though everyone's there in peace and support?
Yes.
And,
Yes.
but
Yes. I would not say arguments, because really the purpose of the group is to practice being with each other in a way that we offer listening and understanding and care. In our culture, the way that we tend to companion people or to try to support them is to offer advice, unsolicited advice, which basically leaves them feeling alone. Because if I offer you unsolicited advice, if I say, you know, Greg, really, you know, have you read Louise Hay about your back problems? I'm talking about me. I'm not really being with you. The purpose of this group is to be companioning each other, just like, what is it like? You know, if you say that you're having a hard time in a relationship with somebody, you know, I would want to go, okay, what's it like to be you? And I would ask you questions and offer you empathy guesses. You know, are you feeling sad? Are you feeling lonely? And then by looking at your expression and hearing your voice, and then I would know whether or not my guess had landed. So.
okay, this is very general. But in modeling, and this is from a recent experience I had in a mastermind group, the patriarchal character seems to have elements of rigidness.
Yes.
And the feminine more fluid.
Mm-hmm. In your group?
No, I think in general.
In general.
My experience and like as myself, as a man, and there's this element that came up where I had this moral thought like, don't lie.
Yes.
And there's a rigidity to it. Even though, you know, I hear people express how, you know, well, I lied because I was protecting myself, or I lied because, and I understand their perspective.
Yes.
I think what's most important to me now in talking with you is these nature elements of male and female that seem to be in opposition, and that fire comes out of because it's energies butting against each other.
Yes.
Have you found a path of living together?
Yes. Well, first of all, I would not say that it's necessarily a male-female thing. I think it's a human thing. And I want to just understand what you meant when you said, don't lie. Does that mean, were you meaning that somebody was implying that I'm not going to lie, I'm going to tell you that I think that you're a real jerk, and that means I'm not lying? No. Is that what you mean? Because I'm not clear about what that part was about.
Here's what I find to be true is when a lie is happening, in my belief and experience, there's something more important to be attended to, and that's why the lie seems justified, because it's sort of a band-aid, it's a glossing over of what's really going on.
Yes, because somebody doesn't want to really say what's really the truth for them.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And so are you saying that that's hard for you to be with when that happens?
Yeah.
Yeah? Is that what you're saying?
I am, because yes, I am. That's
okay.
What I'm saying.
So I want to just offer you an empathy guess. Okay?
Okay. Well, I'm getting a free session here.
Get a free session. So the thing that I love about nonviolent communication is that there's that we all have the same needs. We all have the same physical needs, you know, air, food, water, shelter, those things, but we also share the same emotional needs. So we have pages and pages of lists of needs. And in nonviolent communication, it's like a language of speaking about those needs. And so we have this amazing internal experience that just is natural within us that tells us whether or not our needs are being met. And that's our feelings. So when we have a feeling, if it's a positive feeling, then that's an indication that there's probably a positive need that's being met. If you have a not positive feeling, then there's probably a need that is not being met, that you would like to have met. So I would ask you, when that happens, do you feel some discomfort? Because you have a need for integrity.
Discomfort I would use, and I'm not sure I could leave it at discomfort. It's definitely, there's discomfort, but
is there anger as well?
right. My past experience, recent experience, would be there is anger, though I'm not aware of it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
And because I'm not aware of it, I think then my communication is volatile.
Yes, of course. So then maybe you could even call it frustration, which is like, I see it as a low level of anger. So you feel a sense of frustration, and I'm wondering if a need that's not being met could be safety, emotional safety, that you're not feeling, you're not experiencing emotional safety, which is a need that we all have.
It's a good question, because if I follow that path that the question opens up, then there's like, yeah, there's this realm of what's real. In what I'm hearing real, because I base my decisions and actions a lot on what I hear from others.
Yes.
So suddenly the foundation is potentially non-existent.
Yeah. Which could be pretty unsafe emotionally.
Right.
Yeah. And safety is like a base need.
It's so, because as you know, I'm going through this divorce. There's an element of, in my marriage, an awareness I had, like there's something wrong with the foundation in this relationship.
Yeah.
So there's an element of gratitude for my ex to make a decision to end it. There's also a lot of pain. And the irrelevant question, so like, could we both have worked on that foundation together and really made it, created it, healed? You know?
Yes. Yeah.
And that kind of wraps back into what you were saying at the very beginning of the programming handed down through generations.
Yes.
Like, to partner up with someone, and we don't see that programming from 3-4 generations ago.
Absolutely. And they're not seeing their programming from generations ago.
Right.
But when we look at it through the lens of a family constellation, then it's kind of like there's a traffic jam, and all the cars and the trucks are all mixed up, and we don't see where they all belong. But in a family constellation, when we look at the lineage and we have people step in as representatives for different parts of the life, then it's like taking all the cars out of the traffic jam and putting them in the parking lot so you can see them. And then you go, oh, that's why I made that decision. That's why I always seem to choose X. You know, because my father or my uncle or somebody did that, and I am honoring them. Or somebody was excluded, and I'm honoring them. When people are excluded from a family system because of mental illness, criminality, they did something stupid, whatever, then somebody down the line will take that up to include it. It's kind of part of the oneness.
So have you found that in your life, that there's healing you've done in your family constellation?
I had chronic back pain for the past 25 years. Like all the time, all day, just about every day. And I've been studying facilitating constellations, and I was reading this book by this man who's like the foremost constellation facilitator for medical constellations. He helps people with life-threatening illnesses through family constellation work. And I thought, oh, that might be fun. And I was going to go see him in a workshop in Seattle, which I did just a few months ago. And so I was reading halfway through his book, which is called Even If It Costs Me My Life. I read halfway through the book, and I was out at the Vedanta Retreat Center in Lima, which is a great place to go for silent retreats. I was there for like a 3-day silent retreat. I was out walking in the woods, and all of a sudden, I had a spontaneous experience of unconditional love for my father, who died when I was 13, and we never had a good relationship, and he was did not have the emotional resources to parent me in a loving and caring way. And so our relationship was very strained, and he was very punitive. And my whole life, since I was 13, have seen him as with a great deal of resentment and animosity, my whole life. So here I am out in the woods having this experience of unconditional love for him, like a physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, all together. My whole body was like glowing. I could feel golden energy coming off my body. I was delighted. I started talking to him. I just went, oh gosh, we have so much to talk about. I have so much to tell you. Oh my God, I love you so much, And I was like, woo, this is great. And I got back to my room, and I thought, I think I'll just do a little yoga. And I got out my yoga mat, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so much more flexible. Oh my God, I'm so much more flexible. And that was in April. That was 6 months ago, maybe more. I haven't had any back pain since, not one bit. Yeah, a real physical healing. Mm-hmm.
Brings tears to my eyes.
Yeah, me too. I mean, wow, what a thing. It's all about the love. And in family constellations, what we do is we put people in their right places of honor in the family. And that's hard to do for some people. Certainly hard to do for me. But when they are in their respected and honored places in our family, then the need for the symptoms don't need to stick around. Yeah.
In my mind, I still want to put a hierarchy to spiritual and physical.
Ah, yeah, that's kind of part of our culture, I think. But not every culture does that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just here in America,
Well, in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Well, that's where we came from, pretty much. Some of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it does seem like a healthier holding to just know both as one and the same.
Look at how much trouble we've gotten ourselves into by denying the physical, by denying sex, some religions dancing, emotional joy. It creates a blockage in the flow of love. When we stop ourselves from our natural expression.
So here's a question then for you, because there's times, and in my experience, I'm going to say it's male energy, that wolf, the, you know, but it's interesting because Kali, you know, I love her as a deity.
Kali is the deity of anger and
tearing apart and rendering.
Right. Yes.
But I also
destruction.
Right.
Yeah.
But I did hear a teacher say that she's also the most compassionate of the deities, and that so often in studying her, people miss that piece of her. And as the debate of, you know, especially now with what's going on in our politics and community, it seems like, you know, the patriarch is such a bad man. And that all the violence is coming from that.
Yes.
And that Kali is a very clear representation of the feminine also having that capability of rendering.
Yes. So from a interpersonal neurobiology viewpoint, Kali would be like somebody that was using both hemispheres of their brain, right? So there's the left hemisphere, which we kind of equate with what you're talking about the male patriarchy. The left hemisphere is all about strategy. It's all about lists and logic and figuring stuff out. It's the left hemisphere doesn't feel. It does not feel. The right hemisphere, on the other hand, is all about emotional expression. It's about vision. It's about poetry and prosody. You know, how we use our tone when we speak to somebody.
Is that what
our
prosody
expression?
is?
Yeah, prosody is like its tone, its volume, it's how we deliver our language, basically, how we express ourselves vocally, auditorily. All of these right hemisphere things that we kind of equate with the female energy, you know, we're dual processors. We use both hemispheres. We can't talk without our left hemisphere. So ideally, the left hemisphere is in service to the right hemisphere. Ideally, so we have the vision of what we want. You know, we get the creative idea. We want to make a painting. We want to be a photographer. We want to, you know, change the world through videography. And then we need the left hemisphere to get us marketing and, you know, get it done and figure out how to edit it and that sort of thing. And I think there is definitely a imbalance when people are using more of one hemisphere than the other. And I think I could point to that, to issues in our government right now.
So I'm stuck on you saying we should have the left hemisphere in service to the right hemisphere.
Yes.
Because that, to me,
Yes.
I heard the hierarchy, you know, one lording over the other.
Yes. The left hemisphere doesn't see souls. People are tools. People are to be used as tools. The right hemisphere can see into somebody's heart.
To me, at the risk of creating argument,
That's okay. Oh, let's argue.
Any time we enter a situation of one over the other, we are entering imbalance.
Yes, absolutely.
So it seems that what we're really working towards is that step of grace that's beyond duality, where it really is one, and these elements of lists and action are co-creating
Yes.
with
Yes.
the spirit and
Yes.
the ethereal.
Yes. That's a balanced brain. It's a regulated brain. It's a secure attachment in terms of attachment theory, in how we relate to each other. It's using both sides of the brain. Yeah.
Do you think that you have that in your life for yourself?
I'm learning that. I'm becoming my. I've been studying attachment theory. In fact, I just was at a constellations conference a couple of weeks ago where I led a workshop that was called "Using Constellations to Improve Your Love Life." How adult attachment styles affect the flow of love, and it's about when we're babies and all we have is the brain use pattern of our primary caregiver. That's all we have. That's God to us, because that's our link to belonging, right? So we take on the attachment style of our parent, which then later has a direct impact on who we choose to be in intimate relationship with. Whether they move toward intimacy or away from intimacy is very important to us in terms of how we move toward intimacy and away from intimacy with friends, with teachers, with, sweethearts. So I was raised in a it would be called an insecure attachment environment that's called avoidantly attached, because we're going to attach in some way. We're attached. It's how we attach. Does our parent move toward intimacy or away from it? And in an avoidantly attached home, the parents, such as mine, everything is very orderly, everything's in its place, dinner's on the table at 6 o'clock, go to the right schools, but there's no emotional interaction, not much. So it's like a desert, emotionally, starved for emotional relationality. So that's how I was raised. But what I'm doing is I am becoming an earned secure attachment because of the work that I'm doing with my brain and the interpersonal neurobiology work and the constellation work, all of that together.
And what do you mean by earned?
That means that I wasn't raised in a secure attachment environment, but because our fibers of attachment in our brain are so neuroplastic, they are happy to change. They're happy to change, but it takes a lot of time. And I remember when I first started studying with my teacher like 6 years ago, and she said, it takes 5 years to change your brain. 4 or 5 years to change your brain. I went, oh, come on. I live in California, we can do it in a weekend workshop, Yeah. No, not so much.
Right.
But the thing is that I didn't know what the change, what my brain was capable of doing until it started to change. And it's so subtle changes. Subtly, I start to love myself more. Subtly, I start to judge other people less. Subtly, I start to be more inclusive, more compassionate, more empathic. Yeah, and now, 5 years later, 6 years later, I can stop myself. Today in yoga, okay, I love my yoga teacher, Leah. I love her. She's so sweet. And she was helping the person next to me, and like her butt was like right there. And I just wanted to take my block and like pat her on the butt, She would think it was funny. I would think it was funny. That's something I would have done without thinking about. But I just went, just, do I need to do that? Do I need to have, elicit a response from her about that, whether she likes it or whether she doesn't, And then I went, no, I don't. That was because of the brain change I've gone through. silly kind of example, but it just came up today.
Right. No, that's a great example of what I struggle with the creative, which is that moment and no thought to it, the improv moment.
Yes.
And yet we all have experienced that action without thought sometimes is very harmful.
Yes.
And to find that balance and,
yes.
and trust.
Absolutely. Yes. Another area that I've been able to change as part of moving into a more earned, secure attachment is that I've been able to modify my default network mode, which is the brain pattern that we have when we're not focused on something specific. It just goes into default mode. And many of us have a savage default mode, which is very, self-deprecating and self-hateful even. And, where when we don't think we're not focused on something specific, our brain will go into, well, you sure didn't do that very well. And, look at how many, look at how you're doing with relationships and gee, that kind of thing, whatever. And that changes. That changes too as the relationship between the part of our brain and our limbic system that just wants to keep us safe by reminding us about bad things that happened, triggers our brain, just to try to keep us safe. It doesn't know anything but the past. It has no sense of time. It just knows right now. And right now, here comes a dog that's just like the dog that bit me when I was little. And all of a sudden my body goes like that, trigger reaction. So what we get to do is we get to, through many processes, go back to that time when that happened and offer that young child empathy and companioning for where she was. Because in trauma, it's not so much that something terrible happened, it's that it happened and we were alone. We were not accompanied by somebody that was caring and understanding. And when that happens, when we accompany that younger part of us, then that memory moves out of the amygdala, which is in the limbic system, which is our emotional mothership.
It's back here.
Mm-hmm. It's back here.
The
it's at the brainstem where the brainstem comes in, and it scans for safety and mattering 40 times a second. Every second, 40 times, our amygdala is scanning the environment. What was that over there? I hear a sound. That person that's coming toward me is wearing a,
jacket.
Weird jacket. that something happened in the past about a weird jacket. So then what happens when we companion that part of us is that memory physically moves from the amygdala up into the prefrontal cortex, is where all the good stuff happens, and then goes into the hippocampus that timestamps it and is able to then say, okay, next time I see that dog, my hippocampus is going to tell me there's the same dog that bit me, same kind of dog that bit me when I was little, but that was a long time ago. That is not now. And that was hard, and it might be a little uncomfortable to be around that dog, but I'm okay now. Yeah.
So have they truly mapped out the brain to such a degree like you're speaking?
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you think, well, this is a stupid question. Mind if I ask a stupid question? It's a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it. Do you think there's potential that 10 years from now they're going to go, oh, 40 times a second, that was crazy, that was archaic?
Oh, they just did.
No.
They just did that, because the way I learned it, it was 4 times a second. And that was a lot. And I just learned a couple of months ago. The teacher that I work with studies all of the scientists that do all of the deep work that I would never be able to read or comprehend. She loves it. She's like a researcher. She loves it. And then she puts it in language that normal people can understand. And then I take it and I make it even simpler by drawing silly cartoons. Yeah.
I'm still blown to think of an experience that's living back. Now, I'm not going to get the scientific terminology correct, but it's living back here.
Yes.
And that then you can physically bring that memory,
Yes.
energy,
Yes.
to the front,
Yes.
process it,
Mm-hmm.
and then bring it down to a different place where now it's in a different storage area than it was.
Yeah, it's right next to, they're right next to each other. This is, if you go like this, this is your brain stem, and if you fold over your thumb, this is your limbic system. Your amygdala is here, your hippocampus is here, and then if you take your fingers like this, and then you go like this, that's your forehead. That's your prefrontal cortex right up there.
And this is what's processing it and then storing it in a different place.
Yeah. So here's the amygdala and here's the hippocampus,
So
right
there's
next door.
really truly like the dogs that bit me in second grade.
Yeah.
That I still feel fear.
Yes.
I can move that
Right.
through processing.
Absolutely.
To there, and
Absolutely.
that's crazy.
And then it gets time stamped, and then you know that it isn't happening right now. Because if you think about it, your amygdala is just trying to keep you safe, you know, and if you were like a caveman out hunting around, you would want your amygdala to tell you if that tiger that's coming towards you was something to be worried about.
All right, so here now, where does this fit in? Because when we pass, the brain, as it is, is left behind.
Yeah.
What's next on the other side?
Well, what's next on the other side is epigenetics, is what we inherit when we get born.
What's epigenetics?
Epigenetics is the study of how our parts of our legacy shows up in our bodies.
So going back to the family.
Yeah, this is like back to the family thing. Well, I mean, you said what happens. Well, we die. When we die, our brain stops working, and that happens, and then a new sperm hits a new egg, and
But do you think, like Katherine, speaking semitically, maybe, blah, blah. So Katherine, the ego, is going to cease to be, but there's an essence that's been working and processing.
Yeah.
Is that going to continue on?
I personally believe that it does. I believe that if there's only one of us, then there's something that goes into another expression, and I can't say exactly what it is. I wouldn't call it reincarnation. I don't know. I know a lot of studies of people that have in other cultures, especially, where children come to their parents and they say, "Oh, I'm not your child. I'm the child of somebody that lives over in the next village that they've never been to." And the parents go, "That's crazy." And the child said, "No, really, I'll show you where the key to the door is, And then you take them over there, and there's a key sitting exactly inside the wall where they left it or something. I mean, there's stories about that. If intercessory prayer works. I did a little study when I was in ministerial school about, when you pray for somebody long distance, it has an effect. Quantum physics, it's like everything is connected.
So when you said earlier, Katherine passes on and then another sperm impregnates another egg, and do you think like potentially instantaneously that essence is...
I have no idea.
Do you have any experiences in your life that are evidence of life beyond death.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had an experience when I was really young. It wasn't so much life beyond death, but it was something else that I couldn't explain. I was in my front yard, and I was watching my older brothers play football, and I looked up at the window on the second story that was my bedroom, and the wind was like moving the curtain, and I got this experience that was very, very clear, that I was here to do something important. And it was like, took over my whole body, just like the experience that I had in the healing of my back. That was a numinous experience as well. That was a sort of a other kind of worldly experience. And that experience that I had as a child was so profound, and I knew that I didn't have the resources to figure out what it was, and that nobody around me also had the resources to figure out what it was, and I was going to have to remember it and come back to it. And I did. I remembered it, and throughout my life I would go, remember that? Do you know what to do about that yet? No. Remember that? Remember that? Yeah. What do we do with that? I don't know, you know. And still there's there's mystery around it, but it was so real that, you know, nobody could argue with me and say, oh no, that wasn't real, because I know it, you know. Yeah.
Do you think that it is being satisfied?
Yeah, I do. Probably in the last the last 4 years, I think the combination of changing my own brain so that I love myself a lot more, and I accept myself, and I can acknowledge myself, and feel that my purpose in life, which I believe is to be contribution, is playing out. So yes. It seems to happen in small groups. That's how it seems to happen. Yeah.
It's a beautiful world for you. It's a beautiful world, not me. It's a beautiful world. It's a beautiful world.